Have you ever wondered what would happen if the world government had raised Luffy? What if the kid destined to be the freest person in the world was turned into Imu's perfect weapon? And more importantly, what would happen to the Straw Hat crew and the world in this dark reality? I'm Shoyo, and if you're already digging this idea and want to find out how this dark timeline plays out, go ahead and drop a like and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit the bell so you don't miss any of our insane One Piece theories. It helps me out a ton to keep bringing you these stories. Now, sit back and get comfortable, because what comes next will change everything you know. Well, it would all start just a few days after Sabo's fake death. While Luffy and Ace were still trying to cope with the loss, Cypher Pole would figure out who ate the fruit Shanks stole. And when that intel reached Marineford, Imu wouldn't just see a kid. He'd see the return of the enemy the government had tried to erase for 800 years. That night, a strike team would surround Fuchsia Village. Garp would be away on a mission, Makino would hide Luffy in the bar's basement, and the mayor would try to negotiate. But their orders wouldn't just be to capture the boy, they'd be to wipe out all witnesses. By the time Shanks intercepted the Marines' comms and made it back, it'd be too late. Fuchsia would be up in flames. On the ground, he'd only find the torn straw hat and a trail of blood leading to the port. Luffy had been taken to Mary Geoise. Now, you might be asking yourself why Imu wouldn't just kill Luffy. The answer is simple. If he died, the fruit would just respawn somewhere unknown and could slip away again. Keeping Nika locked inside a controlled vessel would be way safer. That's how Project Eclipse was born. Down in the dungeons of Pangaea Castle, Luffy would be deprived of light, food, and any human contact. Anytime he smiled, he'd be punished. Whenever he asked about Ace, Sabo, or Shanks, he'd be told they all abandoned him. The goal wasn't just to make him obedient, it was to completely destroy any desire for freedom inside him. But even broken, Luffy would still be Luffy. He'd wolf down enough food for 10 agents, spit brutal truths right in the nobles' faces, and refuse orders he thought were pointless. The scientists would call these personality residues and try to bury them even deeper. For 10 years, he'd be trained by Lucci, the admirals, and the Holy Knights. Garling would teach him discipline. Shamrock would throw him into real combat. Lucci would drill Rokushiki into him until it was pure instinct. Under the watchful eyes of the 5 elders, Luffy would learn to use rubber as a military weapon. Combining Soru with his elastic momentum would let him make impossible changes in direction. His Geppo would be even more insane, with his legs compressed like springs. His Tekai would absorb impacts before sending them right back, and his rubber fingers would let his Shigen hit targets from completely unpredictable angles. At 13, he'd develop Gear 2nd. By 15, he'd master Gear 3rd. And at 17, he'd get branded with the government's most dangerous mark, Imu's Pact of the Deep. This pact would boost his strength, speed up his healing, and let him cross the Night's Abyss. In exchange, Imu could control his body from anywhere. The government thought they had created the perfect assassin. They were dead wrong. And the first sign of that would show up in the East Blue. Luffy's first mission would be to execute Captain Morgan for corruption. Rocking a white suit and a blank mask, he'd storm Shell's town, dodge the Marines using Soru, and crush Morgan with a single hockey-coated punch. Then he'd spot Zoro tied up in the courtyard and recognize the look of someone who'd rather die than give up on their dream. He would tell him, "Rot here or work for me. In return, I'll put you face to face with Dracula Mihawk." Zoro would accept. Things would play out similarly, but this time he wouldn't become a pirate. He'd become the unit's attack dog, blending his Santoryu with Soru and Renkyaku. He'd still keep his honor, but he'd execute enemies before they could even draw their weapons. In Syrup Village, the government would find Kuro hiding among civilians and order a purge. Luffy would take out the captain in seconds, but the agents would still plan to blow up the mansion to erase witnesses. To save Kaya, Usopp would volunteer as a sniper. He'd still be scared all the time. The difference is he'd learn to hide it behind calculations, escape routes, and flawless shots. Armed with sea stone ammo and observation haki, he'd become the Phantom Sniper. At the Baratier, Don Krieg would try to take over the restaurant just like the original story, except a single Gear 2nd combo with Soru would punch straight through his armor before he could even use his arsenal. Sanji would realize right away that this squad was completely unhinged. When a vice admiral threatened to sink the Barati for helping pirates, Sanji would strike a deal. He'd serve the government in exchange for Zeph's safety. By mixing Geppo and Renkyaku into his kick-based fighting style, he'd become the ultimate infiltrator. But behind everyone's backs, he'd still feed prisoners and open up escape routes for civilians. Then came Arlong Park. Arlong had stopped paying off corrupt officers, so the government would send the unit to wipe him out. Luffy would tear through the park like a monster. The first punch would shatter Arlong's saw sword. The second would send him flying through walls. Before the fishermen even knew what hit them, Zoro, Sanji, and Usopp would have already taken care of the rest. Upon finding Nami's maps, Luffy would realize she was worth more alive. Right in front of the officers, he'd declare her strategic government property and draft her into his team. Nami would think she just traded one owner for another. What she wouldn't know is that Luffy only labeled her that way to stop her execution. Don't worry, she'd figure that out way later down the line. The unit would start breaking every Cypher Pole record out there, but with every new member, Luffy grew a little less obedient. He'd claim he needed Zoro for muscle, Usopp for precision, Sanji for infiltration, and Nami for navigation. In reality, Nika's instinct was doing what it always did, bringing people together. The ultimate proof would happen in Water 7. CP9 would capture Robin and squeeze every bit of info they could out of her about the poneglyphs. After that, Lucci would get the green light Night to execute her. Luffy would step right between them and declare that her knowledge was way too valuable to waste. Lucci would call him defective and attack. The brawl would absolutely wreck the Tower of Justice. Lucci would use Rokuogan, but Luffy would absorb the impact with his rubber pin, Lucci's arm, and fire back the jet Rokuogan straight to the chest. Lucci would be taken down by the very monster he helped create. Robin would join the squad as a prisoner, constantly watched and locked in sea stone cuffs. Even so, she'd start whispering about Ohara, the Void Sentry, and an empty throne that was supposed to stay that way. When the Gorosei caught wind of this anomaly, they considered wiping them all out, but their success rate was just too damn high. Instead of destroying them, Imu would decide to make the group official to keep them on a tight leash. Decked out in black and white, they'd get a new name, Division L. The government thought the L stood for Luffy. Robin knew that one day it would stand for liberation. Years of missions would go by until a massive piece of news shook the world. Ace had been captured by Blackbeard, and his execution was set to happen at Marineford. Luffy wouldn't react to the name, at least not while he was awake. That night, he'd smash 3 tables in his sleep and mutter a word he hadn't said since he was a kid. Brother. On the day of the execution, Whitebeard would attack, and the war would kick off just like the original. As the pirates pushed forward, Sengoku would reveal the government's secret weapon. A black portal would open up right in the middle of the plaza, and Division L would step out in front of everyone. Zoro would block Vista and finally face off against Mihawk, fulfilling Luffy's promise. Usopp would take out cannons with sea stone shots. Nami would use her weather tech to deflect waves and lightning. Sanji would tear through the sky using Geppo, kicking commanders down before they could even get close to the scaffold. Robin would lock down entire groups without even breaking formation. Then, Luffy would make his move. Marco would try to stop him, only to get slammed into the ground by a hockey-infused punch. Jozu would rush in next, just for Luffy to shatter the ice beneath his feet with Gear 3rd. Even the admirals would be blown away. But when Luffy reached the execution platform, Ace would finally see the face behind the mask. Luffy, for a split second, everything would go dead silent. Garp would recognize the grandson he thought was dead. Ace would start screaming, reminding Luffy of Sabo, the tree where they drank sake, and their promise to live free. Right before his memories fully clicked, Imu would activate the Pact of the Deep. Luffy's body would move on its own. His hockey-coated hand would thrust straight toward Ace's chest, but it would stop just inches away. For the first time in 10 years, Luffy would disobey the force controlling his mind. Akainu would spot the hesitation and launch an attack at both of them. Luffy would jump in front of Ace and take a magma fist straight through the chest. His heart would flatline as Imu's mark consumed his body, commanding the weapon to get back up. Ace would hold his brother and say, "You never belonged to them. You were always free." Then, Luffy's heart would beat again. His hair would turn dead white, the ground would turn into rubber, and the laugh the government had spent 10 years trying to destroy would echo all across Marineford. Gear 5 had awakened. But Luffy wouldn't awaken out of hatred. He'd awaken because, by choosing to save Ace, he made the very first truly free choice of his life. His Conqueror's haki would explode alongside the drums of liberation, tearing through Imu's mark and overpowering the regeneration of the knights sent from the abyss to hold him down. The admirals would order Division L to execute the traitor. Zoro would be the first to draw his swords against the Marines. Sanji would step up right beside him. Usopp would aim his rifle at the platform, even while shaking. Nami would hijack the Denden Mushi comms, and Robin would just smile, finally understanding why this broken kid kept bringing people together. Orders are orders, Luffy would say, laughing, but I don't really like these. And guys, from this point on, the war would get absolutely insane. Luffy would bend Kizaru's light attacks, bounce Akainu's magma strikes back like rubber bullets, and use the air itself as a trampoline to absolutely wreck the plaza. Zoro would hold Mihawk off just long enough to open up a path. Sanji would rescue Ace using Geppo. Usopp would shatter the cuffs with an impossible shot, and Nami would navigate everyone through the one corridor that hadn't caved in yet. Even so, it wouldn't be a perfect ending. Whitebeard would still be mortally wounded and choose to stay behind. With one final quake, he'd split Marineford in half, giving Division L a window to escape. Luffy would grab the ground, turn the island into rubber, and launch the shockwave straight down. Marineford would start sinking as Marines, pirates, and agents scrambled for their ships. Ace would survive. Garp would stop Sengoku from going after them. And Division L would vanish into the new world, taking Robin, the government's secrets, and the one weapon Imu could never control with them. They wouldn't be pirates, not yet anyway. They'd be something way worse for the world government. Rogue soldiers who knew all their patrol routes, weapons, codes, and dirty secrets. Now, Luffy would have a new goal. He wouldn't just want to find the One Piece. He'd want to march right up to Mary Joie, smash the empty throne, and free every single person who got turned into a tool. But there'd be one last problem. Shanks was still alive, and his ties to the Holy Knights would put Redhair right in Division L's crosshairs. If you guys want a part 2, let me know down in the comments, because in the next one, I'll cover the invasion of Mary Joie's, the inevitable showdown between Luffy and Shanks, and the massive final battle between Division L and Emu himself. So, what did you think of this ruthless version of our captain? Drop your thoughts in the comments and feel free to leave your ideas for future videos. What other what if or crazy theory do you want to see on the channel? Smash that like button if you enjoyed today's video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell. We're putting in the work to bring you 2 videos a week, and some of them will be based purely on the ideas you guys leave in the comments. So your suggestion could literally be our next script. Share this video with that friend of yours who is totally addicted to One Piece. Thanks so much for sticking around till the end. Big hug to everyone, and remember, I'm Shoyo, and I'll catch you in the next video. I'm out.